I spent $52,000 on concrete, rebar, and 12-foot steel panels just to watch her life fall apart. And honestly, it was worth every single cent. She thought because she drove a white BMW X5 and ran the new HOA next door, she owned my land. She was about to learn that in Texas, the deed is king, and a piece of paper from 1940 carries a hell of a lot more weight than a real estate license and a mountain of debt. My name is Jake McCoy, and my family has owned Riverside Ranch since my great-granddaddy bought the first 50 acres with his mustering out pay from the First World War. He added another 50 after the second one. It ain't the King Ranch, but it's ours. It's a slice of hill country that's seen 4 generations of McCoys born, work the land, and be buried in the little family plot under the big oak tree. We raise prize-winning Angus cattle, and the rhythm of my life is marked by the seasons, the price of feed, and the bawling of newborn calves in the spring. It was a good life, a quiet life. Until they started building the Magnolia Estates, on the 100 acres bordering my northern fence line. At first, it was just the noise. The rumble of bulldozers and the whine of saws from sunup to sundown. I could live with that. Progress, they call it. Though it mostly looked like scraping away everything that made the land beautiful, to put up a bunch of beige boxes that all looked the same. My wife Sarah, a high school science teacher in town, was more bothered by it than I was. She'd stand on our porch, coffee cup in hand, and just stare at the churned up red dirt where there used to be live oaks and cedar. "It's a scar, Jake," she'd say. I'd just nod and tell her the trees would grow back around it eventually. I was naive. I thought the problem was the construction. The real problem hadn't even moved in yet. The problem arrived in a cloud of dust and entitlement, driving a white German SUV that probably cost more than my best bull. Her name was Karen Bradshaw. She was the developer, the lead real estate agent, and the self-appointed president of the new Homeowners Association. The first time I met her, I was mending a fence near my main gate. This gate opens onto a dirt and gravel road that runs about a half-mile across my property before it hits the county-maintained blacktop. It's my road, my deed, my survey, my property. The official entrance to Magnolia Estates was a whole other affair, a grand stone entrance 2 miles down the main road. My little ranch road was a shortcut, and a bumpy one at that. She pulled up, the BMW idling with an expensive purr. The window slid down. A woman with sharp cheekbones, too much makeup, and a hairstyle that looked like it could withstand a hurricane stared out at me. She wasn't looking at me, so much as through me. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dripping with the kind of condescending sweetness that sets your teeth on edge. "You'll need to move your things. I have clients coming through in 10 minutes to view the new model home." She gestured vaguely at my toolbox and the roll of barbed wire on the ground. I straightened up, took off my hat, and wiped the sweat from my brow with the back of my glove. Old habits. "Ma'am, this here is private property. Riverside Ranch." I pointed to the faded but perfectly clear sign hanging from the gatepost. "The entrance to your development is back on the main highway." She gave a little tinkling laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, that's cute. Bless your heart. This road is the most direct access. It's a community easement for the residents of Magnolia Estates. It was part of the land deal." She said community easement like it was some sacred phrase that gave her dominion over all she surveyed. I put my hat back on. "Ma'am, with all due respect, you've been misinformed. There's no easement on this road. It's been part of the McCoy family deed since 1940. I can show you the survey plat down at the county clerk's office if you'd like." Her smile tightened. The fake polite mask slipped just a fraction. "My lawyers have handled everything. This is an access road. Now, if you'll please clear the way, I have a sale to make." Before I could respond, she put the BMW in gear and nudged the front bumper against my gate, a gentle but unmistakable threat. I had the gate open to work on the fence, but the message was clear. I stood my ground for a second, then decided it wasn't worth the fight. Not yet. I sighed, picked up my tools, and waved her through with a tip of my hat. Politeness first. It's how I was raised. She didn't acknowledge me, just sped off, kicking up a rooster tail of gravel that peppered my boots. I watched her go, a knot tightening in my gut. This, I knew, was just the beginning. The next week, it got worse. I was moving a small herd of pregnant heifers, including my prize girl Daisy, from the south pasture to the north one, closer to the barn. It's a slow process. You don't rush 1,000 pounds of expectant mother. They were ambling across my private road, the same one Karen Bradshaw had claimed as her own personal highway. I was on foot, just guiding them with a gentle hup, hup when I heard it. The high-pitched whine of an engine moving way too fast. It was the white BMW. She came flying over the little rise, doing at least 50 on a road that was barely safe at 20. She saw the cattle, and instead of slowing down, she laid on the horn, a long, blaring, angry shriek. Cattle and loud, sudden noises don't mix. Pregnant cattle and loud noises are a recipe for disaster. The herd panicked. They scattered, thundering in every direction, their eyes wide with terror. I saw one heifer stumble and go down hard. Another slammed into a fence post. And Daisy, my calmest, sweetest cow, worth more than that car, bolted toward the creek bed, a place full of loose rock and steep banks. I saw red, pure, unadulterated rage. I ran into the middle of the road, waving my arms, screaming at her to stop. She slammed on the brakes, skidding to a halt not 5 feet from me, the smell of hot brake pads filling the air. The window came down again. "Move your filthy cows, you disgusting redneck trash," she screamed, her face contorted with fury. "This is a road, not a barnyard. I have a closing in 30 minutes. I walked up to her door, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. I was shaking. "You listened to me," I said, my voice low and dangerous, "and you just stampeded a herd of pregnant animals. You could have killed them. You could have killed me. This is my land. This is my road. You are not to use it again. This is your first and only warning. Do you understand me?" She scoffed, a look of utter disbelief on her face. "You're threatening me? I will have you arrested. I will sue you into the Stone Age. My lawyer will be in touch." She revved the engine. "Now get out of my way before I run you over too." I didn't move. I just stared at her. I memorized her face, the sneer, the arrogant tilt of her chin. Finally realizing I wasn't going to budge, she threw the car into reverse, spun the wheel with a squeal of tires, and roared back the way she came, presumably to take the long way around. I stood there for a long time, listening to the engine fade, my heart pounding in my chest. Then I spent the next 2 hours gathering my terrified cattle. The heifer that fell had a bad sprain. And Daisy went into early labor that night. The calf was stillborn. Sarah and I buried it out by the creek. She held my hand, her face pale. "You're planning something," she said. It wasn't a question. Good. The next morning, I went to the hardware store and bought the heaviest duty chain and padlock they had. I drove to the gate, looped the chain through the steel bars and around the thick cedar post, and snapped the lock shut. It was a big, ugly, defiant chunk of metal. It said, "Keep out," in a way the sign apparently couldn't. I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. Let her lawyers deal with that. It didn't even last 2 days. I drove out to check on it Friday afternoon and found my brand new chain lying in the dirt, cut clean through with a pair of bolt cutters. The gate was wide open. Tire tracks from her BMW and at least one other vehicle were pressed into the soft dirt heading up my road. She hadn't just trespassed again. She'd brought her customers with her. She was actively using my land to sell her houses. The politeness was over. The warnings were done. This was war now. I drove back to the house, pulled out my phone, and started looking up security camera systems. I also called my cousin, who's a deputy sheriff. The first phase, the polite phase, was officially closed. The invasion had begun in earnest, and I was about to start documenting every single second of it. I had no idea just how deep her lies went, but I was damn sure going to find out. The first step was evidence. I spent that weekend installing a series of motion-activated, solar-powered trail cams. I put one right on the gate, angled to get a clear shot of any vehicle and its license plate. I put 2 more further up the road, hidden in the thick branches of live oak trees, covering the main stretches, and I put a fourth one overlooking the spot where the heifers had stampeded. I wasn't just building a case for trespassing, I was building a record of endangerment. Each camera uploaded its footage directly to a cloud server, time-stamped and secure. From now on, every time Karen Bradshaw broke the law, she'd be starring in her own little movie. It didn't take long to get a hit. Monday morning, around 10:15 a.m., my phone pinged. The camera at the gate had triggered. I watched the live feed as her white BMW pulled up. She got out, a pair of bolt cutters glinting in the sun, and snipped the new, even thicker chain I'd installed. She tossed it aside like trash, opened my gate, and drove through, followed by a Lexus SUV full of what looked like a well-to-do family. I watched, my blood boiling, as she stopped halfway up my road, got out and started gesturing expansively, pointing towards the creek, my pastures, my barn in the distance. I could almost hear the sales pitch through the silent video feed. And all of this rustic charm, is your backyard, exclusive access for Magnolia Estates residents only. I saved the video. It was Exhibit A. This went on for 2 weeks, every other day a new video. Sometimes she was alone, just using my road as her personal shortcut. Other times, she had clients with her giving her fraudulent tours. I replaced the chain 4 times. It was a token gesture at this point, a prop for her to destroy on camera. Each snip of the bolt cutters was another nail in her legal coffin. I now had 47 time-stamped videos of criminal trespass and destruction of property. I felt like a spider, patiently spinning a web. Then she escalated. She realized the locked gate, even one she could cut, was an inconvenience. She wanted it gone, and she decided to use the government to do it for her. The first salvo in the paper war arrived in a crisp white pickup truck, with the Environmental Protection Agency logo on the side. A young, earnest-looking fellow in a polo shirt and khakis knocked on my door holding a clipboard. "Mr. McCoy?" he asked. "I'm here to follow up on a complaint regarding potential contamination of Willow Creek. We received an anonymous report about unregulated dumping of cattle waste and chemical runoff from your property." I just stared at him. Willow Creek was the lifeblood of my ranch. My family had protected that water for almost a century. "Contamination?" I said, my voice flat. "My cattle drink from that creek. I drink from the well that's fed by that same aquifer. You think I'd poison my own water?" He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Sir, I have to follow every report. The complaint alleged that your feedlot operation is draining directly into the watershed, in violation of the Clean Water Act." "Feedlot? Son, this is a pasture-raised operation. My cows graze on grass. The only thing they're dumping is manure, which is what cows do. It's called nature. It's fertilizer." I was trying to keep my temper, but it was fraying fast. This was her work. I knew it as surely as I knew my own name. It was petty, it was vindictive, and it was designed to bury me in paperwork and fines. I spent the next 4 hours walking the EPA agent over every inch of my northern pasture. I showed him the creek banks, clear and firm. I showed him the water, running clean over the limestone bed. I showed him my herd, healthy and content. I even took him to my wellhead and drank a glass of cold, clear water right in front of him. He took his samples, made his notes, and finally, as the sun was getting low, he sighed and tucked his pen into his shirt pocket. "Mr. McCoy," he said, shaking his head, "off the record, this is the cleanest ranching operation I've seen in 5 years. There's nothing here. I don't know who filed this complaint, but it's what we call harassment by bureaucracy. It's completely baseless. My report will reflect that. I'm sorry to have wasted your time." I thanked him and watched him drive away. I wasn't even relieved. I was just cold. This was a new level of attack. She wasn't just trying to bully me. She was trying to destroy my livelihood, my family's legacy, with lies. The very next day, a similar vehicle arrived, this time from the county health department, following up on an anonymous complaint about improper disposal of animal carcasses, creating a public health hazard. This was a reference to the stillborn calf we had buried. I had to walk another official out to the small, respectful burial site, marked with a simple fieldstone. The health inspector, a woman who looked even more tired of this than I was, rolled her eyes. "So you buried a dead animal on your own 50 acres of rural property?" Shocking, she said, her voice thick with sarcasm. She signed her form, noted the complaint as unfounded, and left. 2 official, baseless complaints in 2 days. It was a clear pattern. But I had a feeling she was just getting warmed up. The next move was public. A reporter from the local news station called. "Mr. McCoy, we're doing a story on the new Magnolia Estates development and some access disputes with local landowners. The developer, Karen Bradshaw, claims you're illegally blocking a public right-of-way and creating a safety hazard by forcing residents to use the main highway entrance." My stomach dropped. She was taking her lies to the press. "That's not true," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The road is private property. I have the deed and survey to prove it. She's the one trespassing." "Well, she's provided us with documents she says are from the County Planning Commission that show an easement," the reporter replied. She also expressed concerns about your aggressive and threatening behavior. "Would you care to comment on camera?" "Documents from the Planning Commission?" The lie was getting more elaborate. "No comment right now," I said, "but the truth will come out." I hung up the phone, my hand trembling slightly. This was spiraling. She was fabricating documents now, smearing my name. My reputation in this county was all I had, and she was trying to burn it to the ground. Sarah saw the look on my face when she got home from school. "What did she do now?" she asked, her voice grim. I told her about the EPA, the health department, the news reporter. I told her about the documents Karen claimed to have. Sarah sat down at the kitchen table, her hands clasped in front of her. For a long minute, she was silent. I could see the worry in her eyes, but underneath it, something else was hardening. The same steel I felt, growing in my own spine. "The county clerk's office," she said finally. "You need to go there tomorrow. Don't just rely on our copies. Get certified copies of everything. The original deed from your great-grandfather, the survey from 1940, every single plat map and revision filed since. We need an unbreachable wall of paper." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that phrase. Unbreachable wall. The paper war was one thing, but I was a rancher. I dealt in the physical world. Fences, gates, land. An idea began to form in my mind. A big, expensive, concrete idea. The next morning, I was at the county clerk's office when it opened. The air inside smelled of old paper and dust, a scent I usually found comforting. Today, it felt like a battleground. I spent 6 hours hunched over massive, leather-bound plat books, tracing my property lines with a gloved finger. I found the original 1940 survey, a beautiful, hand-drawn map. My road was clearly marked, entirely within the boundaries of the McCoy property, with no mention of any easement, current or future. I paid for certified copies of everything: the deed, the survey, the tax maps for my land, and the adjacent parcel that was now Magnolia Estates. The clerk, a woman named Martha who had known my father, gave me a knowing look. "Having some trouble with those new folks, Jake?" she asked quietly. "You could say that," I replied. "Just so you know," she said, leaning closer, "that developer, Ms. Bradshaw, was in here a few weeks ago asking about easements on your road. When I told her there weren't any, she got real agitated, said the county had to create one for her. That's not how it works." My heart beat a little faster. Confirmation. Karen knew there was no easement. She had been told officially everything she was doing, every claim she was making. She was doing it with the full knowledge that she was lying. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was fraud. On my way home, I saw Eddie, our mailman, making his rounds. I flagged him down. Eddie's been delivering mail in this part of the county for 30 years. He knows everything about everyone. "Eddie, got a question for you," I said, leaning on his truck door. "You delivering to that new Magnolia Estates yet?" He sighed, pushing his cap back on his head. "A little. Mostly just junk mail for current resident. But I've seen the marketing packets. They're glossy." He paused, then lowered his voice. "Jake, you should know. That Bradshaw woman is putting it in writing." "Putting what in writing?" Eddie looked around, then reached into the passenger seat and pulled out a slick, full-color brochure. The cover showed a smiling family in front of one of the beige houses. He flipped it open to the centerfold. It was a map of the development, and there, clearly marked with a dotted red line, was my road, labeled Exclusive Private Ranch Access. Below it, the text read, "Enjoy the ultimate in privacy and convenience, with a dedicated road through the historic Riverside Ranch, an exclusive amenity for residents of Magnolia Estates." He leaned over the fence. "If you can call the side of a mail truck a fence, she's promising them access," he whispered, even though no one was around. "She's selling your road as an amenity." That's when I knew I had her. It was one thing to lie to my face. It was one thing to lie to the press. But to put a fraudulent claim in a sales contract, that was a whole other level of stupid. That was wire fraud, mail fraud. That was a felony. I took a picture of the brochure with my phone. "Eddie, can I keep this?" "Made an extra copy," he said with a wink. "Figured you might need it." I got home and laid it all out on the kitchen table for Sarah. The certified deeds, the surveys, the photo of the fraudulent brochure, the 47 video files I had saved to my laptop. The whole ugly story was right there. She was cornered, and she didn't even know it yet. She thought she was winning the paper war. And then, as if on cue, the final piece of her strategy arrived. A knock on the door. It was a process server. A young man who looked apologetic as he handed me a thick envelope. "You've been served, Mr. McCoy." I opened it. It was a lawsuit. Karen Bradshaw and the Magnolia Estates HOA were suing me for damages related to the illegal obstruction of a public thoroughfare and seeking an injunction to force me to remove my gate permanently. She was demanding $100,000 for the devaluation of her properties due to the access issue. I looked at the legal papers, then at the mountain of evidence on my table. I started to laugh, a low, cold laugh that surprised even me. She had just handed me the one thing I needed to bring my entire case into a courtroom under oath, a lawsuit with her name on it. She thought she was cornering me. In reality, she had just walked straight into the kill chute. The paper war was over. It was time to build my wall. I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about stopping her from trespassing anymore. This was about making a statement so loud and so permanent that no one would ever question who owned this land again. It was about taking her biggest lie, the promise of access, and turning it into her financial ruin. This was going to be a full-blown, scorched earth professional revenge. I had all the proof I needed to bury her legally now. I was going to bury her physically behind a 12-foot wall of solid concrete. And as I stood there looking at the lawsuit in my hand, I thought about all the people out there who have to deal with bullies like her. People who get pushed around by HOAs and entitled neighbors who think the rules don't apply to them. Well, the rules were about to apply. Hard. If you've ever been in a situation like this, where you feel like you're backed into a corner by someone who just won't listen to reason, I want you to hit that like button, because you're going to want to see how this ends. Subscribe to the channel because the story of Karen Bradshaw's downfall is one for the ages. It's time to call the contractor. The first person I called was my lawyer, a sharp old boy named Tom Chalmers who'd handled my father's estate. I drove into town and laid everything out on his vast mahogany desk. The certified deeds, the 1940 survey map, the stack of affidavits from the EPA and Health Department, printouts of the still frames from my security footage, and the crown jewel, the glossy Magnolia Estates brochure. Tom, a man not easily impressed, leaned back in his leather chair, steepled his fingers, and let out a low whistle. "Jake," he said, a slow grin spreading across his face, "this isn't a case. This is a public execution. She's not just trespassing. She's committing blatant, indictable fraud, selling an asset she doesn't own as part of a real estate transaction. The district attorney would have a field day with this. Her lawsuit is the most self-destructive legal document I've ever seen. It's a signed confession." "So we countersue?" I asked. "We do more than that," Tom said, his eyes gleaming. "We let her dig the hole deeper. We file a response denying all claims and stating our intent to prove clear title. We let her spend money on her lawyers, racking up fees. We let her continue to sell these houses, based on this fraudulent promise. The more contracts she signs, the more victims there are, and the bigger the fraud case becomes. We let her get so overextended that when we pull the rug out, the fall is catastrophic. And while she's digging, I said, leaning forward, I want to build something. I told him my idea. Not a fence, not a bigger gate, a wall, a permanent 12-foot high, steel-reinforced concrete barrier stretching the entire 300-foot width of the access point. An agricultural security barrier, as I decided to call it. Tom's grin widened. An agricultural security barrier, he repeated, savoring the words. I love it. Perfectly legal on your own property, especially with documented security threats. You'll need a permit, but it's a simple agricultural filing. No public hearing required. It's for livestock protection and trespass prevention. It's untouchable. He scribbled a note. I'll file the permit paperwork this afternoon. You go hire your man. My man was Big Mike. He ran a construction company that specialized in concrete and steel work, everything from barn foundations to commercial buildings. He was a mountain of a man with hands like cinder blocks and a wad of chewing tobacco permanently tucked in his cheek. He hated two things in this world: shoddy workmanship and entitled people. I found him on a job site, overseeing the pouring of a massive foundation. I explained the situation. I showed him the videos on my phone of Karen cutting the chains. I told him about the stampeded cattle. He listened, his expression unchanging, just nodding slowly. When I was done, he spit a stream of brown tobacco juice onto the dusty ground. So this lady, he said, his voice a low rumble, thinks her BMW gives her the right to run your stock and cut your locks. That's the long and short of it, I said. And you want to block that little road of yours. For good. I want to build a monument to private property rights, I said. 12 feet high, steel rebar, deep footers. I want it to be there when my grandkids are running this ranch. A slow smile spread across Big Mike's face. Son, I'm going to build you a wall that a main battle tank couldn't get through. Even a tank ain't getting through this. When do you want to start? This was the crucial part of the plan. She's having a big grand opening sales event in 2 weeks, I said. Saturday and Sunday. She's advertising it all over the county. Banners, radio ads. She'll be trying to funnel all her potential buyers down my road. Mike's smile turned predatory. So we start that Friday. We start that Friday at dawn, I confirmed. I want the forms up and the first pour done before she even has her morning coffee. The next 2 weeks were a strange kind of Cold War. On Tom's advice, I replaced the chain on the gate one last time and then did nothing. I let her cut it. I let her bring her clients through. I just sat back and collected more video evidence. She grew bolder, more arrogant. She probably thought my lack of response meant I was intimidated by her lawsuit. On the local news, she gave a tearful interview, painting herself as a small business owner being bullied by a hostile agribusiness operation. She held up her fraudulent planning commission document, and the reporter just nodded along. It made my blood boil, but I followed the plan. Let her dig. Meanwhile, the preparations for the wall were happening in secret. Big Mike staged his equipment and materials at a friend's property 5 miles away. Concrete was ordered from a plant in the next county. The rebar cages were prefabricated. It was a military-style operation. Sarah was my co-conspirator, handling the logistics. She set up a cooler full of drinks and sandwiches for the crew. She called the electric company to arrange for a temporary power pole. She was all in. She picked a fight with the wrong family, Sarah said one night, watching me go over the blueprints with Big Mike. Her initial worry had transformed into a kind of fierce, righteous anger. The Friday of the grand opening arrived, cool and clear. At 4:30 a.m., the convoy started to move. A bulldozer, an excavator, 3 flatbeds loaded with steel forms and rebar, and Big Mike's crew of 6 hardened construction workers rolled silently down the county road. They turned onto my property a half-mile from the gate, cutting across my pasture to avoid being seen from the main road. By 5 a.m., as the first hint of dawn touched the sky, they were in position. The first sound was the roar of the bulldozer. It flattened the area around the gate, clearing a 300-foot-long, 20-foot-wide staging area. Then the excavator came in, its massive bucket biting deep into the earth, digging a trench 4 feet wide and 6 feet deep. This was for the footers. This wall wasn't going anywhere. At 7 a.m., right on schedule, the first concrete truck arrived. The sun was up now. I was sitting in my pickup on a small hill overlooking the scene, a thermos of coffee in my hand. I had a perfect view of my road and the entrance to Magnolia Estates. At 7:15, I saw the white BMW approaching. Karen Bradshaw, ready for her big day. She saw the activity from a distance. The bulldozer, the excavator, the crew of men in hard hats. She slowed down, then sped up, clearly agitated. She skidded to a halt about 50 feet from the new, much wider gate opening I'd made for the construction vehicles. She laid on the horn, the same arrogant, angry blast she'd used on my cows. Nobody paid her any mind. Big Mike had given his crew their instructions. Ignore her completely. She got out of her car dressed in a sharp white pantsuit, completely inappropriate for a dusty construction site. She started screaming. "What is the meaning of this? What are you doing? You are blocking my access. I have a grand opening." Big Mike, as planned, walked over slowly. He was holding a clipboard with the permit from the county. He didn't say a word, just held it out for her to see. She glanced at it, her face turning a blotchy red. "Agricultural security barrier? What the hell is that? You can't do this. I have a court order." She shrieked. She was lying, of course. She'd filed a suit, but there was no order, no injunction. "Ma'am," Big Mike said, his voice calm and deep, "we're working. You're on private property and you're in a hard hat area. For your own safety, you need to leave." "I'm not going anywhere. I'm calling the police. I'm calling my lawyer." She stomped back to her car, snatched her phone, and started furiously stabbing at the screen. 10 minutes later, a county sheriff's deputy, my cousin's partner as it happened, rolled up. Karen ran over to his car, pointing and shouting. The deputy got out, listened patiently, then walked over to Big Mike. Mike showed him the permit and the certified copy of my deed, which I'd given him for this exact purpose. The deputy looked at the papers, looked at the construction, and walked back over to Karen. I was too far away to hear, but I could read the body language. The deputy shrugged. He pointed at the documents. He pointed at my land. Karen started waving her arms, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. The deputy just shook his head, got back in his car, and drove away. The look on her face was pure, impotent fury. Her first attempt to stop the wall had failed. All day the work continued. The rebar cages were lowered into the trench. The concrete trucks, a steady stream of them now, poured thousands of pounds of wet cement into the footers. By noon, the foundation was poured. Then the crew started erecting the huge steel forms for the wall itself. Meanwhile, a parade of confused-looking potential buyers in shiny sedans and SUVs would drive up, see the chaos, and have to make an awkward three-point turn to go back the way they came. Some of them rolled down their windows to ask Karen what was going on. I could see her forcing a smile, trying to explain it away. It was glorious. The climax came around 3 p.m. on Saturday. The wall was now taking shape. The first 6-foot sections of concrete were curing inside the forms. The crew had set up a temporary, heavy-duty construction gate across the opening to secure the site overnight. It was a massive, 10-foot-tall chain-link gate, reinforced with steel bars and locked with a chain thick enough to moor a battleship. Karen had been gone for a few hours, and I'd started to think she'd given up for the day. I was wrong. She came back, and she was not alone. She was followed by a tow truck. Her plan apparently was to have the tow truck rip my temporary gate off its hinges. The tow truck driver, a burly guy in greasy overalls, took one look at the gate, one look at the active construction site, and shook his head. He got into an argument with Karen, pointing at the no trespassing signs, and the permit tacked to the gate. He clearly wanted no part of it. He got back in his truck and left her standing there. This is when she completely lost her mind. I watched from my hilltop perch, my heart pounding with anticipation. She screamed a string of curses at the departing tow truck. She kicked at the dirt. She paced back and forth like a caged animal. Then, she seemed to come to a decision. She marched back to her pristine white BMW, got in and slammed the door. She reversed 100 feet, then stopped. She revved the engine. Once. Twice. No way, I breathed, pulling out my phone to record a video of my own. She's not that stupid. She was. She floored it. She, the BMW X5, her symbol of status and superiority, shot forward like a missile, tires spitting gravel. It hit the reinforced construction gate at nearly 40 miles an hour. The sound was a deafening crunch of metal and shattering glass. The gate, anchored to posts set in 1,000 pounds of concrete, buckled but held. The BMW did not. The entire front end crumpled like an accordion. The hood buckled upwards, the radiator burst in a cloud of steam, and both airbags deployed with a dull thump. The car was totaled. Utterly, completely destroyed. A mangled wreck of German engineering, hung up on a gate it failed to breach. Silence. Then, a car alarm started to bleat pathetically. The driver's side door creaked open and Karen Bradshaw stumbled out, dazed, a trickle of blood coming from her nose where the airbag had punched her. She stared at the wreckage of her car, then at the unyielding gate, and she let out a sound that wasn't quite a scream and not quite a sob. It was the sound of someone who had just bet everything on a single, monumentally stupid act and lost it all. Big Mike and his crew just stood there, arms crossed, watching. One of them slowly shook his head. Mike pulled out his phone and dialed 911. "Yeah," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "We've had a bit of an accident out here at the Riverside Ranch. A driver seems to have lost control of her vehicle. You'd better send a deputy and an ambulance." I stopped my recording. I had it. The final, perfect piece of evidence. Her destroying her own vehicle trying to break onto my property. By Friday, a 12-foot wall would stand where her shortcut used to be. She had screamed until she was hoarse. Now she just stood there, defeated, next to her ruined car, covered in dust and airbag residue. The construction was a success. The wall was being built. And now it was time for the final act. The public takedown. The 2 weeks following the grand opening fiasco were surprisingly quiet on my end. Karen Bradshaw was dealing with the fallout. A totaled BMW. A citation for reckless driving, and a parade of angry real estate clients who had witnessed the debacle. The wall, meanwhile, rose steadily. Big Mike and his crew were artists. They poured the concrete in sections, letting each one cure to maximum strength before moving on. The finished surface was smooth and imposing, a 12-foot high, 300-foot long, steel-reinforced monolith. It was brutally, beautifully permanent. It cost me exactly $52,487, paid in cash from a fund my dad had set aside for a rainy day. This felt less like rain and more like a righteous hurricane. While the concrete cured, my lawyer, Tom Chalmers, was preparing our masterstroke. The lawsuit she'd filed against me was our golden ticket. It gave us the legal platform to introduce all our evidence in a formal setting. Tom filed our response, a mountain of paper that included my deed, the surveys, and a motion for summary judgment, arguing that the case was frivolous because she had no legal claim to the road whatsoever. More importantly, he filed a counterclaim against her, the HOA, and her real estate brokerage for fraud, damages, and legal fees. He attached the marketing brochure, a sworn affidavit from Eddie the mailman, and a detailed log of the 47 trespassing videos. But a courtroom victory would be quiet. We wanted this to be public. We wanted her downfall to be as loud and humiliating as her arrogance had been. We needed to get her, her victims, the media, and the authorities all in one room. Tom found the perfect vehicle, the lawsuit itself. He filed a motion for a mandatory settlement conference. It's a standard legal procedure, but we framed it as a community meeting to resolve the ongoing access dispute concerning Magnolia Estates. We sent formal invitations via Tom's office to Karen Bradshaw, her lawyer, the official representatives of the Magnolia Estates, HOA, which was basically just her, and most critically every single person who was listed on a sales contract or deed for a home in her development. Tom had gotten that list through legal discovery. We also tipped off the local news reporter who had interviewed Karen before, telling him There was going to be a major development in the story he wouldn't want to miss. The meeting was set for a Tuesday evening at the County Community Center. It was a neutral, public space. Karen and her lawyer likely saw it as an opportunity to publicly pressure me into a settlement, to paint me as the villain in front of her homeowners. They had no idea they were walking into an ambush. The evening of the meeting, the room was packed. At least 30 families were there, the buyers she had duped. They looked anxious and confused. They had bought into a dream of peaceful country living and instead had found themselves in the middle of a war zone with a concrete wall blocking their exclusive access. Karen Bradshaw swept in, looking stressed but defiant. She traded the wrecked BMW for a slightly less ostentatious Lexus SUV. She was wearing another power suit, trying to project an aura of control. Her lawyer, a slick-looking man in a shiny suit, whispered in her ear as they took their seats at a table at the front of the room. I was there with Sarah and Tom Chalmers. I was just wearing my usual jeans and a clean work shirt. I wasn't there to look powerful. I was there to present facts. On a table next to us, we had a projector and a screen set up. On the table in front of us were 50 neat stacks of paper, each one a packet of documents. A retired judge, acting as the mediator, called the meeting to order. He gave a brief introduction about seeking an amicable resolution. Then he turned the floor over to Karen's lawyer, who launched into a grandstanding speech about community, progress, and my unneighborly and illegal obstruction. He claimed they had irrefutable evidence of a prescriptive easement. When he was finished, the mediator turned to us. "Mr. Chalmers." Tom stood up. "Thank you," he said calmly. "We won't need to take up much of your time. The facts of this matter are quite simple." He turned to me. "Jake, why don't you start by showing everyone exactly what we're talking about?" That was my cue. I walked to the projector and turned it on. The first image that filled the screen was the 1940 survey map, crisp and clear. I used a laser pointer. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the official survey of my property, Riverside Ranch, filed in this county in 1940. As you can see, the road in question, I circled it with the red dot, lies entirely within the boundaries of my family's land. There is no easement noted." I clicked to the next slide. It was the current county tax plat map. This is the map on file today. Again, no easement. I clicked again. A low murmur went through the crowd. It was a still frame from one of my security cameras. Karen Bradshaw, her face clear as day, snipping my lock chain with a pair of bolt cutters. "This is Ms. Bradshaw on May 12th, committing criminal trespass and destruction of property." Click. Another video, this time of her leading a family on a tour. "This is Ms. Bradshaw on May 14th, again trespassing while conducting a commercial tour." I went through 10 of them, each one showing her breaking the law. The murmuring in the room grew louder. Then I put up the crown jewel. The photo of the sales brochure. The map with the exclusive private ranch access label. "And this," I said, my voice ringing through the silent room, "is the official marketing material for Magnolia Estates. It promises in writing an amenity that Ms. Bradshaw and her company do not own, have never owned, and were officially told by the county clerk's office did not exist." The room erupted. People started shouting. "What does this mean? Did you sell us something you didn't own? Is that why the wall is there?" The buyers, her victims, were turning on her. Karen jumped to her feet. "This is slander. These are doctored photos. He is trying to extort me." Tom Chalmers held up a hand for silence. "It's not slander when it's true, Ms. Bradshaw. And every person in this room who signed a purchase agreement based on that promise," Wambati said, his voice like ice, "is a victim of real estate fraud." He turned to the back of the room. "Isn't that right, detective?" 2 men in plain clothes who had been standing quietly at the back of the room started walking forward. One of them flipped open a badge. "Karen Bradshaw," the detective said, his voice carrying easily over the stunned silence. "You're under arrest for multiple counts of felony real estate fraud and deceptive business practices." The handcuffs clicked. The cameras from the news crew, who had been recording the whole thing, flashed. Karen's face went from indignant rage to sheer, slack-jawed panic. She started to babble, "This is a misunderstanding. My lawyer, you can't do this." Her own lawyer just stood there, slowly packing his briefcase, a man abandoning a sinking ship. The police led her out of the room, past the shocked faces of the people she had cheated, and I just stood there leaning against the table, smiling. As they took her away, Sarah and I walked to the front of the room and started handing out the document packets we had prepared. Each one contained a copy of my deed, the survey, and a letter from Tom Chalmers explaining the situation and outlining the homeowners' legal options for voiding their contracts and suing for damages. We were giving them the ammunition they needed to get their money back. The aftermath was swift and total. The news story aired that night, complete with footage of the meeting and Karen's arrest. The district attorney's office took the case, armed with our treasure trove of evidence. Faced with dozens of fraud charges, Karen Bradshaw's real estate empire crumbled. Her brokerage license was suspended, then revoked. The sales contracts for Magnolia Estates were declared null and void due to the fraudulent inducement. The bank foreclosed on the entire development. She declared bankruptcy, buried under a mountain of lawsuits from her former clients and the debt from her failed project. The last I heard, she was living with her sister in another state, her career and reputation in ashes. The beige houses of Magnolia Estates sat empty for over a year, a ghost town memorializing her greed. Eventually, another, more reputable developer bought the land from the bank for pennies on the dollar. They sealed off the fake entrance near my property for good and focused on using the proper, grand entrance 2 miles down the road. The new residents are quiet. They keep to themselves. They understand where their property ends and mine begins. Sometimes when I'm out checking fences, I stop by the wall. It's a massive, silent sentinel. The concrete has weathered a bit, but it's as solid as the day it was poured. It's more than just a barrier, it's a statement. It says that a person's land is their own. It says that truth matters, and that a piece of paper, a deed passed down through generations, is stronger than any lie, no matter how loudly it's shouted. Sarah and I will sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over our pastures. The only sounds are the crickets and the lowing of our cattle. The peace is back. It's a peace I fought for, a peace I paid for with $52,000 and a whole lot of patience. They say good fences make good neighbors. I agree. But sometimes, when you're dealing with someone who refuses to respect a fence, you need to go a step further. Sometimes you need a 12-foot concrete wall to make a felon. And if you enjoyed this story of pro-revenge and seeing an HOA tyrant get exactly what she deserved, do me a favor and hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories about how we handle things out here in the real world. And share this with anyone you know who's ever had to deal with a neighbor from hell. It might just give them some ideas.